If we were to survey a group of college students, I think a lot of people may not necessarily say they are relativists, but they would definitely show inclinations towards relativistic approaches to ethics. Um, that there is a certain attractiveness of relativism. Relativism is the idea that every culture determines their own sense of right or wrong. And oftentimes what happens is if you're not a relativist, your other option is to say that ethics are universal, and that what's right or wrong here in Springfield, Illinois, or Central Illinois, is right or wrong in India. And so, if you take something like you know how you should handle certain situations, or certain customs about eating, or funeral customs, or other things, that certain customs could be deemed as immoral based upon our analysis here in Springfield. So to say, well, we lack the cultural lens to understand these cultures and these societies, and so we shouldn't be going around sort of inflicting our own views upon other people. And so relativism is very attractive because it's very open-minded. And I think if you were to go out and you were to say, there's a very big popularity among people that, they'll be like, hey, you can't judge me, or, well, that's just my opinion. Well, it can be your opinion, but your opinion, doesn't have to be relegated to nothing more than opinion. For example, there are certain things I think are right or wrong. I'm not gonna, I try to avoid being too specific about things I believe are right or wrong, but um, I would say that if you, you know that one of your classmates is cheating and you don't bother to tell your instructor, that that you are in fact doing something that's morally wrong. I mean, I don't, and I don't just think it. I'm going to say, I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb here and say you're wrong. You should be willing to recognize it and say they're wrong, and that's the end of the story. And yet sometimes people go, well, it's just my opinion, but I think that you should tell them. They kind of degrade it. They kind of degrade their ability to make moral claims. And that, I think, is part of what relativism does, is it says, there's no moral truth, there's just my opinion. There's just public opinion. There's just groups of opinions. And the idea is that ethics become little more than just choices. People kind of relate it to aesthetics. The idea here is if, for example, like, for example, here in the United States, we have a very specific concept of what is attractive, as far as like for a person. As a matter of fact, even regionally, it can be very different. In certain regions, I remember I went to graduate school in Texas. I had a group of students. They were on my ethics bowl team. They were a group of students who went, and we went up to Cincinnati to compete in a team in an ethics bowl competition, and they it was like kind of like a debate slash basically like a debate. I'll say, like, you're given an ethical situation, you have to give your analysis and reasoning, and then the team that does the best job wins. And so I was I was one of the people helping oversee the team, and the idea there was that popularity, or that we went up to Cincinnati, and the students were kind of just like, everybody does their eyebrows strange, like for women, that they were saying that some of the women were noticing that their eyebrows were different, that there was a different aesthetic expected of the way a girl's eyebrows should look, or a woman's eyebrows should look, regionally. Which, I mean, I don't know that I've ever really given much thought to this, but but the case is that there would be a different aesthetic for that. That somebody in Texas would maybe arch them a little bit differently, maybe have a different thickness, etc. And so the case is that what they're basically saying is, what people in Texas consider attractive in eyebrows is different than what people in Ohio consider attractive in eyebrows. But this can be manifest even further. What Americans find attractive may be very different than what people in Africa or people in Asia find attractive. lots of examples, like foot binding, piercings, tattoos. Some of these things would be considered just horribly gross and disgusting, whereas in Asia, a woman with large feet would be less attractive, and so they would bind her feet back in the day. Not necessarily anymore, but back years ago they would have. And so the idea here is that we have different aesthetics for these things. And so what happens is that people go, well, that's just a matter of personal opinion. That's just, what they like is what they like, and what I like is what I like, and it's culturally based. And that's where relativism is born out of, is the idea that just like these aesthetic values of foot binding or tattoos or piercings or eyebrows, that we can then say that that's just what your culture likes, or that's just what my culture likes. But the problem with this becomes is that, that's fine and good with things like, do you eat meat? There's cow, sacred animal, and immoral to eat. Is it immoral to eat hog or pig? Those are fairly simple moral, ethical issues. But when we get into more complex things, such as, murder or foot binding, which is actually, a pretty difficult thing to look at. Women actually having their feet basically broken in half, and in order to make their feet smaller, that left crippled because of it. That is significantly an issue. And so, we know that the popularity is there, but the case is that it doesn't necessarily mean that that we should accept the idea that there is no moral truth.